Mr. Monomoy, who now looks to move through between horses. Heads are turned for home past the quarter pole. 3/4 in 1 minute 12.20 seconds. Sha Sha Shake Me Up. Mr. Monomoy driven toward the inside. Here's Enforceable, who's rattling home with 1 furlong to go. And Enforceable has taken the lead. Mr. Monomoy battles, and on the outside is Silver Slate, but close to home with Julian Leperoux. It's Enforceable. Enforceable to win the Lecomte Stakes.
Welcome back to another Kentucky Derby profile here on Racing Rundown. Today we're going to be talking about Enforceable, the winner of the 2020 Lecomte Stakes at the fairgrounds. And like we do always, we're going to talk about his past races and how I think he's shaping up going into this year's Kentucky Derby. I kind of put him in the same category as Max Player, a horse that is very interesting to me underneath, and I think it is going to be very interesting in terms of a superfecta and a trifecta wager, but not necessarily a win contender. So, getting that right off the bat, I don't think he's a win contender, but underneath run, definitely think we could see some nice things from Enforceable, like he really has been turning in. He hasn't won a race since the Lecomte Stakes at the fairgrounds, but does have 3 really good efforts since then. Good second in the Risen Star behind Mr. Monomoy, or at least his division of the Risen Star. 5th place finish in the Louisiana Derby, which I'll talk about, and another 4th place finish in the Bluegrass. That I think those 2 aforementioned races are better than advertised. So starting off with him, he broke his maiden last year at Saratoga, beat a horse, Portos, who, when we talked about Max Player, Portos eventually came back, ran against Max Player, so good effort there, won by 3/4 of a length. His first stake start was in the Breeders' Futurity. That was won by Maxfield at Keeneland. Second place horse, Gouverneur Morris. People have had a lot of high hopes in that horse going into this Kentucky Derby trail. Ultimately didn't pan out, but Maxfield, we talked about how good of a horse Maxfield was. We highlighted New York Traffic, and Maxfield won that race by 5.5 lengths. Enforceable was only beaten a half length by Gouverneur Morris for second, so he was third, but only beaten a half length for second. Really good effort there. Nice 3rd place finish. Next start was in the Kentucky Jockey Club. The thing that is a little bit concerning about Enforceable in regards to Churchill Downs is that he does have 3 career starts over the track. Has not won, but does have 2 in the money finishes, and all 3 times has been on the board. The 4th in the Kentucky Jockey Club was his most recent effort. That was a race where, the Tiz the Law race, where we already talked about how many excuses were there for Tiz the Law. Enforceable ran a decent 4th there, but I don't think that, the conditions of the track were necessarily to his liking. But ultimately, he was probably the 4th best horse in there on that day. That is the one thing that does make me a little hesitant on Enforceable, is that he has not won over the Churchill Downs surface. But, going ahead to his next 3 starts, the Lecomte he won. The 2nd place finish that he had in the Risen Star was also another really good effort. That was a merry-go-round race. Mr. Monomoy went up there, went pretty slow, and basically got away with going super slow on the front end. His next start, Enforcable's next start, was 5th in the Louisiana Derby. I mentioned that I was going to focus on this race. Yes, it was a 5th place finish, but when we talked about New York Traffic, if you watched that video, you remember that I said that was a merry-go-round race between the 1-2 horses. They both stayed in the same position the entire race, and it really just kind of blew the races up for the closers. Modernist, Major Fed, Enforceable. All 3 of those horses were extremely negatively affected by that, and all 3 of them ran really good races underneath. Modernist 3rd, Major Fed 4th, Enforceable 5th, and that's why I think that race is better than the chart would tell you, because you look at the chart and you see that he was 5th and 4 horses beat him, but I definitely will say if he gets a better pace, which I think he will get in the Kentucky Derby. He gets a good pace setup. He would have run a lot better in that race, but it's not his fault really that Wells Bayou and New York Traffic just went out there and were not going to be caught, because they just ran, basically free ran the entire way around the track. Major Fed, Modernist, you got to give them credit too for also being able to close. And the next start, kind of similar story. Swiss Skydiver and Art Collector both really went out there. But the one thing that really impressed me about that is, anyone who knows Keeneland knows that Keeneland is not the easiest track to close into. And if you look at where Enforceable was at the top of the stretch, he was 10th. 10th, like looked really out of it. You would not have pegged him as horses were coming off the turn. You probably would not have pegged him to be able to scratch out an on the board finish, but he really impressed me, closing really well to get fourth. Was only a neck away from beating Rushy for third, and Rushy was in third in the stretch. You know, it was kind of the horse that had been close most of the time, and was definitely in a better position than Enforceable and horses like Attachment Rate who are coming from farther out to hold on to a position like that. But Enforceable only a neck behind him, got a good fourth place finish. And the thing with Enforceable is, you know, the 3 races at the fairgrounds more so than the race at Keeneland, even though Keeneland is a really hard track to close into. The reason I'm highlighting this with the 3 races at the fairgrounds was because all those were really slow paces, and he closed into them and didn't really have much of an issue with that. So I think he's definitely going to get a better pace in the Kentucky Derby, and you know, with that, I think that will definitely aid him in closing. He doesn't necessarily need it, so if it is a slower on the slow side Kentucky Derby, the one problem I would say is if there is a horse free running, then it's going to be hard to catch a horse, but that'd be for any horse, and I don't think anyone's going to be free running in this Kentucky Derby. The other thing is there's always traffic issues, and it really, for a lot of these horses, it's going to depend on the draw. But if he draws favorably and has a decent trip, I think that, you know, he is definitely going to be a horse that you'll want to include underneath. You know, when we get to our big Kentucky Derby preview that we're going to do next week on this channel, I'm going to highlight the statistic that every Kentucky Derby of the last 20 years, with the exception of 2, those being 2015 and 16, had a really big long shot. And when I say that, a horse of 30-1 odds or greater run in the money in the Kentucky Derby, and that horse was a deep closer. And a horse like Enforceable is definitely one that fits a bill like that. You know, I don't think he's going to be astronomical odds. He's probably going to be around the 30-1 range, because I think his efforts at Churchill Downs may scare people away, and the fact that he hasn't won in his last 3 races, and especially, you know, 2 out of the money finishes. I think that those 2 races were definitely better than advertised, and I think you're going to get a really nice price with Enforceable. And I think that he would definitely be the horse, more so than Max Player. He would be a horse that I would include in my top 4, because I think he'll be a nicer price than Max Player. I think him and Max Player are super similar. But ultimately, for me, I really like Enforceable underneath. I'm going to swallow the fact that, you know, his stakes effort at Churchill Downs wasn't the best, and he hasn't won over the track. I think he's a very valuable use underneath, and I think, you know, if you're playing a try or a super, this is a horse you definitely want to consider, and ultimately I think I would use him. So if you're the type of person who's of that same line of thinking, then I definitely can understand why you're thinking that. Don't, like I said already, don't think he's a win contender, but, you know, stranger things have happened in the Kentucky Derby. If there's a complete meltdown, then, you know, maybe we could just see him and some of the other really deep closers. But aside from that, even if he's not a win contender, there's a lot of upside that he has going into the Kentucky Derby, and I think Enforceable is definitely one of the horses you're going to want to take a closer look at. But anyway, that's just what I have to say. If you do pick him or do decide to bet him in any way, good luck. Thank you for stopping by. Hopefully we'll see you next time, and have a good one.
Action on the far outside, and Enforceable follows Silver State into the stretch. 3/4 in 1 minute 12.85 seconds. It's Mr. Monomoy, driven by Florent Giroux. Turn back, Blackberry Wine. Here's Digital, who's charging now. Silver State then on the outside. Enforceable needs to lift. They come down to the final 16th with Florent Giroux. It's Mr. Monomoy. Mr. Monomoy leads them home in the first division of the Risen Star Stakes, 1 by 3.